One thing is certain, all of us, everyone listening to this, will face transitions in life. And these are big transitions, usually involving one generation that's aging and a generation that's rising and a generation in the middle somewhere. And I have a special guest today. Andrea Carpenter is here from Transition Strategists. Andrea, welcome to the Inner Estate.
So glad to be here. And yeah, we always say you're going to make an exit or a transition vertically or horizontally. So you get to decide which way it's going to be. So
I like that. Yeah. Do you want to be vertical? Do you want to be horizontal?
Yeah.
And this is something that I think is really critical today. Just when I look at the size of boomers, the silent generation that stayed in their homes much longer than we expected, and the smaller size of Gen X, we're snuck in there in the middle, and then the larger millennials. And it's a topic that is particularly of interest right now as we're getting ready to have that big transfer of wealth ever in history. Yep. So I will stop talking because we want to hear from you because you're the specialist that deals with all this all the time. Where do you even start, and what do they need to know that they might not even know they need to know?
Yeah. A lot of people, when they're thinking about wealth, generating wealth, passing it on to the next generation, or building a business that they're going to pass to the next generation, they're thinking of it as this event that is going to happen someday. Someday, I am going to pass my business to my kids. And you think of that singular day. And so maybe the most important thing is transition is truly a journey, not an event, especially when you think about preparing your next generation and what it looks like for them to learn all of the things that they need to do to be good stewards of that and come up and be good participants in the wealth or the business, depending on what it is, or the philanthropy. There's so many different ways that this can go. For them to be able to do that, they need to be able to participate, understand, wrap their heads around these things. And so how do you invite them in? What does it look like to design the future of what this looks like together? How do you still honor the fact that maybe you love working or you love your job or you feel really fulfilled doing that and you're balancing that with what your family says is important or how you should spend your time. So there's so many different moving parts and pieces that come up in a transition. How do you sort of package all of that up? That's a lot of the work that we do. It's less on the technical tax side. Yes, we all want to give Uncle Sam less taxes. Yes, we want to make sure the money is protected in trust. Yes, it would be great to get the lifetime exemptions on gifting amounts to our kids. But those are all very technical hows. It doesn't really address the readiness of you as the owner, the person transitioning, but also your next generation. So happy to talk about any of those topics today as we sort of explore this idea of transitioning. So,
well, I want to ask a very basic question up front, if that's okay. So with the trust, what I've run into is a lot of people think, I don't need a trust. I'm not that wealthy. I don't have that many possessions. A trust is for others, not for me. Could you take a minute and just share who are trusts for?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, it really depends on what your outcomes are. That's why when we're doing work, we're more trying to understand, like, what's your goal? Do you want to give your next generation something? Is there a particular charity you really want to support? How soon do you want to do that? How long are you planning on working? What do you think the markets are going to do or external forces? As you start to paint a better picture of who am I? Where am I going? What does that look like? What do I really want to achieve? What does my next generation want to engage in? You can actually start to ask them, like, how do you see this potentially impacting you and what that looks like? Oftentimes, though, like getting your ducks in a row, having things protected, being clear and sort of documenting some of those things is very important. And a trust is certainly one way that many people will choose to do that. Many different forms of trust, types of trusts. We work very closely with the estate attorney for every single one of our clients who is actually drawing up and helping establish the trust. Because once you know exactly what you want and where you're going, it's a lot easier and dare I say a little bit cheaper when you work with your lawyers to actually establish the trust because it's very clear what the outcome is and what the trusts are supposed to be doing.
Right. And then you can have confidence in that what you put together, which frankly, they can feel a little bit like surreal, So if you want confidence that it is actually set up in the proper manner for what you own, your state, and what you want as the outcome, definitely go the route of the attorney. I would agree on that. Yeah. This is not a good time for a DIY.
Yeah. But we always say, if you can figure out and sort of determine like what is the goal of what we're doing here before we go to the attorneys, we can save time, save heartache and investment into putting something in. And you're like, well, why'd we structure it like that? Now that building is stuck in there, or now I'm not able to use the gift exclusion. I should have invited my kids up into ownership of a limited partnership. So there's so many different structures, again, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And so really understanding that to start before you actually jump into the technical pieces of actually establishing the trusts is important.
Well, you and I both know people that are growing, building. They may own company or companies.
Mhm.
They own property and properties, and they don't have a trust set up yet because they still feel like I don't have enough where a trust would be warranted. Can you just give one final thought on who should at least be investigating that as an option, or what options would make sense for them depending on the desired goal? Like, who should at least be checking this out?
Yeah. If you are 10 to 20 years away from some type of major transition, it's not too early to start thinking about this. So you might be like, well, I'm only in my early 50s. I want to work longer. I don't need to deal sort of with these pieces yet. Well, you never know what's going to happen. Like there are things that will happen that are out of your control that might change situations, and you'll be really grateful that you have done some planning work. But B, to your point of what are the options that I truly have? What does that look like? How do I want to engage with it? The earlier you start in the process, we will start working with people 10, 15, 20 years before they're actually ready to transition. That gives you infinite more options. As you get closer to the end and needing to be able to do things, you're locking yourself into a few options, structures, and different things. And it's crazy because I see people building these businesses for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And then we're rushing all the transition and the components and the selling of everything at the end. So the earlier you start, the more options you have. And that, again, it will depend on what's your tax goal, what's your financial, we call it the how much. How much do you need to live your adventure in your life and where you're going? What are the monthly draws that you're going to need? What is the cash position that you're going to need? Then you can get the money into the correct place. Like maybe you want to move money into a DAF, that's a donor advised fund, to help save on some of the taxes now instead of putting it directly into trusts. But that once that money's in there, it's gone, right? You can only use it for charitable pieces. And so many different factors that can influence how someone might structure it. So when we start a little bit earlier, we have more options and more paths ahead of us and how to actually structure everything.
Do you all focus more on transitioning businesses? Is that your main focus?
Yeah. So where we really started was private and family business transitions.
Mhm.
Most of the businesses we work with on the smaller side, they're doing around $1 million in revenue. As high as family office level transitions is the type of work that we're seeing. I always say that a family is a family, regardless of the size of their assets and the number of things, and taking care of your people, taking care of your employees, taking care of the business itself. We call it a win-win-win for the owner, you as the person getting ready to leave, your successors, anyone who might be coming in to purchase the business, continue it, have it continue running. And also for the business itself, like your business is likely doing a lot of good in your community. The ripple effects, your employees, the vendors, all of that is affected by the transition too. So we really sit in that area is where we've done a lot of our work. We've also recently expanded. If you think of this concept of family wealth as a family business, this is kind of a big part of my story. My dad ended up selling his company to private equity, and talk about a very complicated structure of trusts and limited partnerships and investments that the family is now managing. We stepped sort of into that piece. And so not technically an operating business, but still a very complicated situation and thing that my sisters and I have to understand and know what our role is in it and how we're going to be good stewards of it and how we want to carry it forward and what all of that looks like. So the process is the same also for just wealth transfer. So we're seeing both businesses and wealth transfers.
And you bring up a really important aspect of the wealth transfer. If you don't have the plan in place where people will treat it as an entity, because it reaches a point where it's an entity, there's real risk of strife within relationships, people not understanding points of view, taking things more personally. They're still going to. We're humans, not robots, right? So it doesn't prevent it 100%, but it, I am sure, gives you an external framework for conversations and management and protocols to follow so that the entity is being treated as what it is, and it's not just siblings jockeying for either position or what they want.
Yeah. And
Is
we
that
always,
a good description?
that is a good description. We always say in this type of situation, there's the family business community and the family community. So you will always be family regardless of what happens. But the family business community can put parameters. It can put restrictions on what is allowed or not allowed. Like, unfortunately, some families, they're dealing with addiction. They deal with other mental health. There might be people who get excluded from the ability to participate in some of the family business, monetary sides of the family because of past behaviors. They might just even not be interested in participating.
Right.
You see some of the rising generation, like, not really interested in the wealth. Like, that's not going to do anything for me. I would rather just opt out of that. Well, very sensitive and very hard to talk about. There are ways to navigate through this so you can maintain those familial relationships and the ability to still gather together as a family while still maintaining the other pieces of the wealth. That's really about just bringing the next generation together. Something you said in there reminded me, we call it Transition 3.0. But if you think of Transition 1.0 as dad, maybe mom, 20, 30, 40 years ago would go to the lawyer's office and they would write up all the documents, right? And then they passed away and the lawyers would show up with the books and be like, here is how everything is going to go. Here's who's inheriting what and what you have to do to get it. Transition 2.0 kind of went a step beyond that. We're now talking about it once the plan is made. So the plan is made, and now we're going to share it. So the successors have a chance at least to ask questions, right? About what was your intention here? Or how exactly does this work? I don't quite understand it. Transition 3.0, and where we're really trying to move, where we see a lot of success, is this idea of, can you just invite your successors to the table to design it with you? So if you think you're going to have this wealth transition, why not ask the successors who will potentially someday have to run it, or the business transition? They're going to potentially run it. So what is their timeline? What do they have to learn? Are they excited about it? Does their wife or partner or their spouse, do they recognize the commitment that person is making? Sometimes successors have to relocate to another place to be able to participate. So there's so many factors that are also impacting those successors' lives. How do you really kind of bring those into the conversation as well?
And I know that's a big issue of, first and foremost, do the successors want to do the work? We run into that in real estate with really successful real estate teams that build a big book of business. They actually treat it as a business, and then the children want nothing to do with it. So how often do you run into that in the work that you do? Do you often run into a situation where the heirs do not want to actually work in the business? And then what do you do from that point?
Yeah, that's a great question. We always say can be the problem with assumptions, to assume that person is not interested for some reason or another, and then to make a whole plan, right? And go off and, okay, this is what's going to happen now because I know they're not interested, and we're moving beyond that. So how do you reframe that? Sometimes it's, you just haven't made a good invitation to the next generation yet. They might not actually understand what it means. Maybe there's a world forward where there's an operator in place, but they are an owner of the business. What does it mean to be an owner of that entity and participate in high-level decision-making, but not actually operate day-to-day? And so there's two things at play here. The first is the transitioner, or the person leaving, who's worked in the business their whole life and built this thing up and did it a certain way. You now have to be okay that your next generation is going to do it in a different fashion than you are. On the flip side, the next generation might not actually understand, like, they've only ever seen mom and dad work really hard. I hear this a lot from people. So I'm a millennial, especially Gen Z. We're hearing a lot of, well, my parents work 60, 70 hours a week. I don't want to go in that early. I want flexibility to work remotely. And sometimes they come to the table and the parents are like, it's non-negotiable. You have to be in the office from this hour to this hour. And so there's just a mismatch of understanding. It's like, where is that really coming from? What is the underlying reason that everyone is saying each of these things? Sometimes it's just not matching up in the way because they haven't had a conversation about it. And so to have a facilitated conversation where someone can guide you through, a lot of times at the end of the day, you realize, okay, we kind of want the same things here. Your successors want financial stability. They want to take care of their kids, and you've built a business, and that can potentially offer some of that for them. And you wanted to give generational legacy. You wanted to help support your grandchildren or whatever that looked like. And you're like, oh, those two things do match up. So maybe there is a world where we're bringing that together in the middle. So sometimes it takes a conversation. Sometimes the successors are like, yeah, I really am opting out of this. And to be able to give them a chance to do that, that's their best adventure, living their best next life. That's how you stay together as your family community, because they're walking away from the business community. They're not walking away from you as a person. And you need to understand what the distinction is between those two things so you can navigate that in a healthy way.
I imagine that's really difficult. And on top of that, I don't have any statistics in front of me, but there is, not being dramatic, but epidemic levels of first relationship, inner circle, familial estrangements happening in our current society. How does that come into play? Does that work its way into any of the situations with how you help people?
Yeah. Thankfully for us, we do have core values. We are looking to make sure that our clients are aligning with that. Can you put people first? Can we come to the table? Can we have a conversation? Unfortunately, if the family can't even get in the room together anymore, we're almost to the point where we're not going to be able to help specifically on transitioning the business, because there might truly not be a path forward until we work through some of those other situations and people conflicts. And so sometimes we graduate them. There are other professionals that are really great at high conflict level situations, mediation, depending on what the family needs. It's also okay to say, because remember, it's your journey. You're the one kind of deciding the direction and where this goes. And if one of the outcomes is like, I'm stressed, I'm burnt out, like I would love to get out of this business faster, I would love to do XYZ, and all the cards line up and a buyer comes to the table and you're like, wow, I could just buy this and then I would have choices about what that looks like. We say go for it, right? For us, the success is you have evaluated all your options. You can now confidently say, knowing everything I know, all the inputs about what I want, but also what my next generation wants, the best path forward for me and for my family is this. And that's why a lot of people in our space, M&A attorneys, business brokers, they're taking percentages of your sale at the end. For us, that is not how we're compensated. We do everything sort of on like a coaching, like monthly retainer type of basis, because it doesn't matter to us what the outcome you decide is, as long as the outcome is right for you and for your family. And that looks different for every single family. There are families where I'm like, I'm so glad you decided to go ahead and sell, because if you kept walking down that path of trying to force something that was not working,
it could have led to an estrangement or damaged relationships.
Yes, it could have been worse. And so, just really evaluating and knowing those pieces and how that works.
So I want to make sure that it's ultra clear that the cool thing about your company, the Transition Strategist, is that it can be either familial succession, or it is also assisting in having a successful and as smooth as possible sale to another entity that's not related.
And I'll add a third one in. So we have a good number of clients, the values, right, of passing to an internal buyer that is not family, but is someone that you have worked with for a long time. So we actually have a client, real estate business, has his right-hand person has been working with him for 15, 20 years, and he's ready to start to get out. The other guy's ready to work a little bit more. So they're talking about what would it look like for him to buy a portion of the business. So that's an example of a one-to-one. Elizabeth, actually, she's the founder of our business. She started this 30 years ago. I'm in the process of buying the business from her. We're not related, but I had kind of worked in the ecosystem. We have a few other clients like this. Sometimes it's an owner and there's one or two people from their management team, maybe even a group of 3 people who are thinking about buying. And so we still consider that more close to an internal sale, but non-related people. But when you've been working with someone for so long and you care about them, right? A lot of the principles are the same that we would take with family around, what do you want? What do I want? Does it match? Do we have something here? Do we think we could actually work together? Because at least in the case of Elizabeth and my transition, we'll probably work together as business partners for 6 to 9 years before I fully buy her out and she steps away, if that's the path we decide to go together. So it's a really cool opportunity also. And that's a big part of, for some people, that's the right path of moving forward. Family's not interested, but there are employees who are interested. And so they're exploring other options. And so our process works for that too.
And currently you're the president of the company. So you all, it sounds like you have clarity on your positions and your roles, and it's probably why you're able to have this extended transitional period that doesn't even have a definite timeline or end date, is because there's clarity in the roles and the titles and who's doing what, is the assumption I'm making.
Yeah, so we always say, and I don't want to get too technical, but the transition compass is our thing that really helps you figure out what's the direction we were going. So at least right now we're going in the same direction. I live in Denver, so we're maybe going on a road trip towards Montana. We're not going to Texas. So at least we're like kind of moving in the same direction, right? But which way are we going to go? Are we going to stop? Are we going to make any detours? All of those things are still kind of up in the air. It's something that we keep very open communication on. But when you think about that, our whys were aligned. She wanted the business to go to someone who was going to be able to continue it on. We both want to be able to help a large number of families. Our goal is to help 500 businesses and families sustain and thrive into the next generation over the next 3 years. So we are both super aligned on where we're going and what we're trying to do together as a company. I know exactly what I'm buying and sort of what is on the table for us. She identified me as a successor and who we want to take care of. And the last one kind of in our 4 W's is the many wins. So I have clear understanding of the roles and responsibilities, kind of like you said, of what I'm supposed to be doing, and also what is coming up over the next 2 or 3 years. And that's very freeing as well, because it's not like, hey, I bought a business tomorrow. Like I got an SBA loan and now I bought this business and I have to figure out how to run the whole thing, right? I have a 3 or 4 year runway to say, okay, this year I'm going to do this. And this year I'm going to watch you do the tax returns. And then next year I'm going to take over running the tax returns and you'll help me. And then the year after that, I'm going to fully own the process of doing the tax returns. And so it's given me a lot more runway too on what exactly is it I'm supposed to be doing, when, how, what is that going to look like in our structure. So it's been working really well for us. It's not for everyone, but in many cases where you've been working together a long time and Elizabeth was excited to continue working, right? She wasn't ready to say, I don't want to work with families anymore. So the fact that she gets to stay, she gets to work with families, we have transition guides who work with every single one of our clients. So she's mentoring and training our transition guides who are working with our other clients. And for me, that's the most valuable thing to have her do, because that's not actually a role that I would be capable of taking over from her right now. And so this really, really long timeline in transition has worked really well for us, because it's a very good give and take. On the flip side, right, I can bring a lot of new things around how it's structured and ideas about how to operate it better. And I'm a much more technical kind of step-by-step planner person than she is. She's definitely that like founder, visionary, big ideas, bounces all over. So that piece that I've been able to bring in has helped us really streamline and solidify a lot of those processes. So it's been a great kind of partnership for the two of us to explore together.
It really, it's very exciting. And I like that you have that measurable target and you know exactly that ultimate goal of 500 family businesses in the next 3 years, and that both of you, each in your own way, are working towards that as well as the entire team. But that gives you guys a perspective or a filter to look at all the decisions. Will this keep moving all of us forward towards that goal of 500 families
100%.
and businesses?
Yeah. And sometimes I have to remind her, like, I don't know that that's going to move us there. And sometimes she reminds me, we need to think a little bit bigger, right? What would it actually look like to go out and reach and find those people? And yeah, that North Star, we got that from, we're in Dr. Benjamin Hardy's scaling.com program, and
Yes.
10x is easier than 2x. I love everything
That's
Dr.
right.
Hardy does, but for us, it's like, okay, how do we take those systems and really think about that growth and what's next? And oftentimes that's what a successor will do when they come into your business. If you go that path, people aren't buying a business so it can stay the same or decrease in size, right? And so
Right.
what is your appetite and understanding as a successor? I see where I struggle being Elizabeth's successor, but I also see where she struggles, right? Because she used to be the only decision maker.
Yes.
And now I'm an owner, so she's not the only decision maker anymore, and she has to run things by me. And maybe things in some retrospects don't move quite as fast as they used to move, or she's totally handing off projects that she might have used to oversee, and now it's totally my responsibility and she doesn't touch it anymore, and she misses that. It was stuff that she did enjoy doing that's now my responsibility. And so it's we call it the metamorphosis for both the successor, the person coming in, and the transitioner who's leaving, because you're going through changes in your role. You're going through changes in relationships. Who owns the relationships? Who's responsible for what? You're going through that power, that decision making. You're also going through kind of legacy transitions as Elizabeth thinks about her legacy and I think about my legacy and that vision and where we're going and how does that align. We're both going through some major changes, and that's why it can take longer than people think. In our world, it's 3 to 7 years, sometimes 10 to 15, like I said, for that transition to actually take place.
Well, I think it's why having a coach, an advisor, and someone there with you on the journey that's a third party, that to me is worth more than almost anything, because then you're going to have some protection. Inevitably, things are going to happen. You're going to do something thinking it's great. It's different than how she would have done it. That leads to friction, missed expectations, and disappointment. It's going to happen at some point, right? So having that coach, the mentor, and that partner in the flow of it all, I believe will lead to greater success. Is there a higher success rate of successfully transitioning the companies when they have a strategist like you or Elizabeth or one of your transition guides on their team?
Definitely. So I can at least tell you our statistics. The normal statistic on a first to second generation transfer that's trying to do an internal transfer is about 60% failure rate. By the time you go to generation 2 or 3, it's about 20% that will actually survive. So 80% failure. For us, regardless of the generation, it's a 95% or above success rate.
Nice.
On the transition itself. And again, I think it's just thinking through, what does everyone actually want? The second you say, what does the transitioner want? What does the successor want? How do we both come to the table and design that? It's no longer just the transitioner's plan of how it's going to go. You're inviting the successor in, and it becomes their dream too.
Right.
And that is one of the most powerful things that you could do in a transition, is to have it no longer be just their dream, but a collective dream. And the fact that the successor now, it's not just intention on paper or kind of this like vague thing that's going to happen. The successor has now contributed. And so they're able to strive for their level of commitment. They have committed to doing this thing, to walking this path, to learning these things they need to learn. You've committed to transitioning these things and doing these things that they're going to need to be able to step into that role successfully. And it's no longer just kind of this vague thing. They're now living up to their commitments, not just your expectations, because people don't live up to your expectations. They live up to the commitments that they make. And I think that's at the bottom line. What our process is you invite them in, you figure out what everyone is committing to, and then you start to move forward. And we always say it's not a transition plan. We hear that a lot. I need my succession plan. We don't do transition plans. We do transition roadmaps, because again, they can change and tweak in our own transition. I'm so grateful, but my husband and I had been dealing with infertility, and Elizabeth and I are about to start signing documents. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. This is so exciting. And I was like, this is also terrible timing from an objective perspective of we're about to sign documents. I'm going to become an owner of the company. So what did we do? We pivoted. We waited a year to make sure that I still felt good afterwards. And so that extended our timeline again, even more. But because we had this intention, we knew we were moving in the same direction. She already knew that was something that my husband and I were hoping for. We were able to gracefully pivot. around that, which I really appreciate. So
that is, by the way, congratulations. That's
Thank
great
you.
news. So in everything you're doing, as you were mentioning earlier, it sounds technical. There's tax implications. There's how do you structure the legal entity, all of those things. But ultimately, I believe one of the factors on whether or not any of this will work is the mindset and the self-perception, primarily of the transitioner. Tell me more about the work that you do with your clients to make sure that they are addressing the mindset and the self-perception and those changes and how they're going to manage that.
Yeah. Great question. There's a lot of really sad statistics in our world. Another one is that people that decide to sell their business, 70% will regret it after the first year or at some point within the first year after selling it. And that is just so sad. Not that you're not going to mourn or grieve the change, right? But I think it goes to what you just said. They're so wrapped up in getting the highest value for their company and how it's going to work and when the private equity things are going to execute or what the buyer's going to do and how the money's going to get transferred. And you'll hear people say it as a joke, right? But I can't wait to go golf once I sell my company. Like that's my plan. Like that is not a plan. And so it depends on the owner, how much they've been thinking about this, how aware maybe they are, what their desire is in terms of how long they want to work or stay. But if an owner is saying, I'm truly done, or I want to look like what it looks like to go out, a couple things. The first is we do a tool called the objectives matrix. That's really about why are you doing it? And it's not just like, why are you doing it for the money piece? Again, if the money is all we care about, then there's probably a values misalignment and we won't be the right people to work with you anyways. But for a lot of them, it's, I want to take care of my employees. I have my life partner and we really are excited to do XYZ together. Or I have these grandkids, my family, my extended family. I want to spend this time with my kids. I want to do this philanthropic thing. I want to do this thing for my help. So really helping them dig into that at its core, understanding that it's beginning to paint what we call a picture of your next adventure. Because you have to have something that you're moving towards, or it's really hard to leave where you are today. And so I would say foundationally, that's there. Our guides are trained in many different modalities and types of work. So the approach that an individual guide, we're always making sure to match our guide with our client based on how we think they will work and together and what that will look like. The guide will take them through in a different way, but at its core, it's, do you have a clear picture of where you're going, the implications of everything that you're doing? And as you actually walk through the journey of transitioning your business and engaging, and especially in a family transition, it's actually can be so much fun to bring your family in and to work with them and to see your kids flourish. And that's a big part of your metamorphosis, just kind of stepping through those pieces and seeing those things can get you even more emotionally ready for ultimately what it looks like to step out. But there are clients that we've worked with, part of their transition plan was they were going to work until they died. And that's totally valid too. Right? Yeah. As long as you're communicating to other people what is happening and what your desires are and what your role is and how you want to participate, and that next generation knows how they can contribute and how they can get insights from you. You continue to provide value to the business. That's helpful for that next generation. They know when things are going to happen versus someday this will all be yours. We hear that a lot in our work, right? Yeah. Yeah. Like what does that even mean? To me as a successor, how do I engage with that? What does that even look like? So yeah, I think on a high level, those would be some things.
Yeah, especially if the main thing that the heirs see is the stress and the frustration. Because a lot of times the disruption is what causes, you don't come home every day and say, today was great. We operated at 91% of all our goals. Like you don't come home and talk about the everyday goodness. Typically speaking, they'll see the frustration and the stress. And then you're like, one day, all this can be yours, and they're like, oh, don't threaten me, like,
know. Yep. 100%.
Hey, could we talk about that on Sunday brunch? Because I don't know that I want that. Yeah, it's interesting. For you, so that you have firsthand experience as being one of the recipients, one of the successors that came along. Did you have that firsthand experience prior to jumping into this as a career, or by coincidence was this already your career path and that also happened?
Good question. My passion is really with the rising gens, the next gens is sort of what we call wealth inheritors, people who are coming into money. My dad I was already in college by the time he sold my business, so I didn't grow up with it. Everyone's experience is different.
Right.
When you talk to next gens. So it's really my passion. That's actually my podcast is called Your Next Gen Friend. And it's really about what is the experience of a wealth inheritor or a business successor in the case of the work at the Transition Strategists. And what is that like? Because there's a lot of misconceptions and ideas that are not correct around what the next gen is like, and they're never going to work as hard as we work, or they're just entitled. They're just going to take the money and go blow it all and spend it all. And that's not the reality of 98% of the successors that I meet. That's not their story, and that's not what they're looking at. So I had decided I wanted to do something to really help the rising gens in a meaningful way. And so that's ultimately what led me down the path to meet Elizabeth. And it's been fun to do it in the context of the family business transition, because there's a very tangible asset and thing here. But as we expand into the wealth transitions too, really understanding, how did your family set it up? What does it mean? Or what are the expectations of you as a successor? How do you talk about this, or how do you not talk about this? And what are the implications on your life and your friendships and your marriages? You're talking prenups, you're talking all of these other things, right? That enter your world when this happens that you might not necessarily. And it's not, most of the people I met in college, this wasn't something I sit down at the dining hall and I'm like, let's talk about inheriting money from our parents.
Yeah, right.
Because a lot of them, are like, I have to work these jobs and I'm making this money. And so it's a really interesting place. And so I joined a mastermind group, Go Abundance Women. It's probably 6 years ago now. And when I first joined that group, I was like, oh, I'm not qualified to be here. I'm not a first generation person who's building wealth. Like, a lot of my wealth is because my dad worked really hard and now I'm inheriting and I have to figure out how to be a good steward of it. And I struggled with that for a really long time. Like, do I belong here? What does that look like? And so that's the work I had to do for myself, right? And on the flip side, what that group taught me was me sharing my story about how hard I'm working to be a good steward of my parents' money. And I guess some of it is my money. Now, see, I even still use those words, but to be a good steward of this and to still try to be growing my own businesses and thinking about my own investments and how I want to raise my kids and what that's going to look like is the best illustration, because what a gift you are giving to your kids.
Absolutely.
If you give them wealth, like, there is no doubt in my mind what a gift my parents gave me. And now I want to be a good steward of it. And the fact that my parents did it so different from so many next gens that I meet. I was in my 20s when I learned specifics about everything and what it was going to mean and when it was going to come. And my dad was very open, like, we're still figuring this out. We don't know exactly what this means, but here are some ways that you could start to participate if you want to. That was such a gift to me, because now it's not like I'm in my 30s, I'm going into my 40s, and now it's not like I have to figure all this out and what it means to me. It's like I've been a participant in this all along. And so it's actually a great illustration of what our work tries to do, is how do you bring the successors along with you? So that's really where my passion is in this work. I love supporting and empowering the next generation.
I think that's amazing. So, and clearly that gets you up and moving every morning.
It does. Yeah, it does.
So what else do you do, especially in that role of president and owner? What else do you do to make sure that you're growing as a leader?
Great question. I'm in quite a few mastermind networking learning communities of my own. I've always been a big fan of peer learning. There's a group called Exchange, which is kind of teaches how do you facilitate and move groups through questions and ask better questions of groups and families. That's been super fun to apply in this space. Our Evolve program actually has some large components of it, which are peer group learning, especially for the successors, to know you're not alone. You're not the only person going through this. Someone else is navigating this too. Let's get feedback from each other. Has anyone else had a situation where your dad kind of said this thing that was a little off color and you're wondering how you should react or how you should respond? To give people that feedback from their peers, not just their transition guide, as soon as we can, is a big component of it. So the peer learning and then my peer learning of my own in Exchange and Go Abundance Women, a couple of local groups. We do EOS in our business, so I'm learning more there. So always just kind of seeing, where does the business need me? Where could I expand as a leader, expand my capacity, expand my knowledge? And I'll happily spend a little bit of time there. So
it's critical. It's good that you are clearly leaning in and understand that importance of it. I have a random question. So do you and Elizabeth have a guide for your transition?
Good question. We probably will in the next phase consider bringing someone in. We've been hesitant to bring someone in from our own team. But we do truly believe, like when we look at the way other people do this work, we're like, we're really the only people that do this work in the way that it is. And so what does that look like? So we've kind of self-led our own transition. We did this year when we joined the scaling program, and we have our strategist through that. So that is an outside coach, right? So we reach these points where, and right now it's more growth decisions, but having that outside perspective, outside person, like you said, is so valuable. We're certainly bringing that into some of our transition work. Like Elizabeth's like, I think we should go this way. And I'm like, I think we should go this way. I'm like, ooh, there's actually some tension here because you're the majority owner and I'm the successor coming up. I'm feeling tension about that here. So we have to maintain a very open dialogue because of our situation and where we're at. But yeah, to have a person to kind of help look and oversee will likely, as we move into the way our transaction is set up, is I'm buying the first 40% and then we're going to renegotiate and decide how to handle the rest of it together. So I imagine when we reach that point, we'll be bringing in more people to help us. So
Good. It's one of those, similar to a doctor. Yeah, there's certain things you can handle on your own. Oh, I'm having an allergic reaction to, hay fever.
Yep.
And then there's things where bring in another doctor. Don't try to do it yourself. So it's interesting that you guys, that's smart to know what you genuinely believed and you are executing on independently, and also know that you'll bring it in when the timing is right. And hopefully slightly before needed.
Yeah. We're also talking about, so part of our work, I mean, you need to know where you are today, where you're going, how you're going to get there. We've done a lot of those components. So now we're really in this like implementation phase. Like, what does it look like to actually do it? Things that come up here, boards, shareholder agreements, invitations, a lot of those small things. So we've gone through some of that. We're talking about how do we grow and expand our board that would bring in more people, right? To offer perspective on some of these high level things. And so there's other things that you can do too, as well, to ensure you're getting that well-rounded perspective on what you're walking through.
Yeah. And keeping the communication flowing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that it's really, really exciting.
Yeah.
I am sure anyone still listening to us wants to know more about how you're navigating family life and being president of the company and growing this transition. So how is all of that playing out for you?
It's really been a season of great abundance for me. I'm so grateful for everything that I have an opportunity to do. At the time, I look back at it now, I'm like, oh, I definitely treated like signing our buy-sell agreement for the initial piece as like an event, right? It was going to be this thing, and then I was going to become an owner of the company. And now it's much more fluid. I'm pregnant and expecting baby number 2, which is so exciting. And
that is amazing.
I know our business is growing. We've had our biggest year yet so far. For me, it's really, again, I think that reframe from we want to hit a revenue goal of blah, blah, blah to we want to help 500 families. That is such a tangible thing that we can touch. Like, I know what a family is, or I know what a business is, and I know what the impact will be if 95% of those 500 or even a higher percentage walk through that transition and are successful. So that feels extremely abundant as well, which is really fun. So yeah, stop treating that like execution or that thing or that estate or that trust that you need to set up, right? Those are going to be milestones on your timeline, but those aren't the things that are going to move you forward and propel you and really make that meaningful impact on what's next. So,
are you feeling as if you're able to achieve everything you want with work at Transition Strategist and the work with the family wealth and have time for yourself and your family? Are you feeling like there's
It's a good
enough time to
question.
go around for all three?
There's push and pull. For me, family always comes first.
Mhm.
Obviously, with my parents and my sisters, we're very entwined in what that looks like. And so some of that does come more naturally. But then the business also, Elizabeth and I are close. We're building a great relationship. There is give and take between the two of us as partners on seasons of when someone is leaning in more, when someone is leaning out more. And I think as long as we can keep that communication really open on what is happening in our personal lives, that's how we put each other first. At the end of the day, people first is our value. That's because we work with the families and
Right.
we're trying to help them put the people in their family first. But that's also true inside of the company. And how do you really engage? And what does that look like? And all of those different pieces as well. So I think living with that value first has been the best thing that we can do. And it helps make that balance feel a little bit more achievable. But there are mornings it's like, okay, where does my focus have to be today? Like
Right.
it does have to be here or it does have to be here, and just making very conscious decisions on how and when I'm going to spend my time and communicating that to my husband, to my daughter, to my parents, to my sisters, to my business partner and our team, so that everyone knows where I'm at and where I'm going, has been helpful as well to help keep everyone taken care of.
What do you do when you need time just for yourself?
Right now, being pregnant, it feels like I never have time really alone.
Well, you're never really alone anymore.
You're never really alone. I have been trying to do personal retreat days. That's a big thing in my world. Just a day where I don't take any calls and I can go. A mixture of self-care. So a massage or getting my nails done, just some quiet time. So I'll be like, oh, I don't have to think about this.
Right.
Reading a book for fun, mixed in with so on my strengths finder, I am a futuristic. I do have high strategy. So for my brain to be able to take that personal retreat day and be like, okay, here's all the projects coming up. I need to prioritize this one and do this and do this. That is the best thing I can do to help keep the whole system kind of moving forward, is to spend that time thinking. And then, of course, we're in the era of AI. So I'm loading a lot of that into my dashboards. And then it's looking at my task list or giving me recommendations on a day-to-day of, hey, you said your rocks were this and your personal goals were this and you haven't touched that thing in 2 weeks. Like, is it actually important to you? And I'm like, oh yeah, it is actually important to me. So I should probably prioritize that. So that's been a great extra level too, between that and my human accountability partners, to help make sure I'm living up to the commitments that I make to myself.
That is so funny. I am also futurist and strategist. Those were the two.
Yeah. I love the Strengths Finder. Yeah.
I do too. I'm going to put a link to that in the description, even though neither one of us wrote that. It gives you, it's just a slightly different insight, and it allows you to lean in more to your natural way of being. I think it's really been helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's very funny. I'm curious, since you have the similar way that your mind works, do you ever find yourself where people ask you questions about the past and they want you, I call it rehashing. Do you ever find yourself just where you're like, I'm not going to rehash that and change it to something in the future?
Yeah. There's a lot of wisdom that we can get off of things that happened in the past. I learned this in my exchange training. The power of a past, present, future. So what is a story or something that happened in the past? What are the strengths that you're harvesting from that? What are the lessons that you learned from that? To me, those are also inherently kind of forward-looking questions, because you're taking a story from the past and you're recognizing how it's starting to impact the future. How does it change what you would do today? But also, how does that change what you would do in the future and what's possible for you based on what you learned? So I love that
you
framework.
pull it through and actually prepare so that you have more, this isn't quite the right words, but control over your reactions if and when something does happen. Yeah. So I'm not saying that we don't learn anything from it, because sometimes people ask me questions about things that I haven't thought about for years that I'm at peace with. Yeah. And I don't feel like disrupting it or discussing it.
Yeah. That's fair
and
too.
Sometimes, they'll challenge me sometimes that they'll add a meaning to it of that it's unresolved or it's still lingering, and it's really not. I'm just way more excited about what's through the windshield than what's in the rear window. Yeah. So it is.
We actually, with all of our clients, we have an assessment. It's not the Strengths Finder. I always say if we can bring the Strengths Finder in also as an extra layer, but our assessment is called the IMAP, one of the constructs on that is, are you a futurist or are you a realist? People do live different in where their brain is. So understanding in your family or in your business system as you start to go through the transition, what people are going to be living more in the future and what people are living more in the present, because that is an inherent tension that is going to start to come up as you start working on timelines, 2-3 year timelines. What's happening? What's coming up? Who's doing what? And the other person sitting there like, yeah, but what about XYZ that we need to do today? That's not taken care of. And so when you can recognize and bring language in for those things as well, everything is a balance.
One of the things that I like about that is the way that you're describing that conversation and that structure is it's giving credit and value to both. And so you're like able to preserve the integrity and the self-perception of each, that what they bring to the table is important. And then it also, I'm assuming, gives you the ability to have certain people take on certain tasks involved that will be better suited for that natural inclination.
Yeah. It also gives you language for things that maybe you didn't have language for before. So one example, Elizabeth is a high adapter on her IMAP and I'm a much higher planner. I could throw her in a webinar with slides she's never seen before and could deliver a presentation. And you would be like, wow, it was an amazing presentation. Like that gives me hives. And so that's one reason the two of us work together so well. But sometimes I'm like, we can't pivot on this. Like we have a big webinar that we're doing very soon. And I'm like, we're going to practice like 3 or 4 times because I know you're going to change the words every time. But if we practice at least 3 or 4 times, I'm going to know mostly the words that you're going to say so I can respond better because this is a big deal for us and for our company and moving forward. So it gives you words. And we always say it's qualities of a high-performing team or a high-performing family. People need to be acting in the way that they're naturally wired. So if she's more of an adapter and I force her to do more planning, she's also a super high creative and she's also a super high futurist. So she loves coming up with ideas. If I'm like, hey, Elizabeth, sit down at your email inbox and respond to these 200 emails, that is no fun for her, right? And so we staff our team appropriately to make sure that she has the support she needs on those things. And so that's important in a transition in a family system, that you know what everyone is how they're wired so that you can honor that. Start to have discussions around it. There is learned behavior and things where people can deviate off. But as a general rule, it gives you a starting point for like, why did that person say that? Oh yeah, they're kind of wired that way. Did they mean it in a mean way? Or am I just perceiving it wrong because I'm this other type of person? So it's a great tool.
Who should be reaching out to transition strategists?
We hear about 50% of the time from the successors and 50% of the time from their parents or the owner or transitioner. Ultimately, as the owner or the transitioner, you have the decision-making power to do that and to make an invitation to invite your next generation in. Whether they're related to you or not, you still have to make an invitation. You still need to kind of figure out what you're doing. We always say before the buy sell. So if you're moving somewhere towards the buy sell, that's actually, we have a lead magnet and a resource. Elizabeth wrote a book called It's a Journey that you can get at beforebuysell.com.
Okay, good.
So just think, before the buy sell, at any point in time, 5 years is great, 3 years is fine, 10 years is even better. To kind of map out, you have walked through this journey of building your business and thinking about what that looks like in growth year over year and all of those things. You've done that with so much intention. Why not design what it actually looks like to step away? And I don't want to say step away because that might not be your story, but to design your next adventure with the same intention as you've designed your business. Again, you're going to give yourself more options. So we'd be honored to talk to any business owner or wealth creator in that position to see if we can help. And if we can't help and it's truly you need an awesome estate attorney or you need a new CPA or whatever else, we are the quarterback on your team that can help connect you to those people. We work with all of those amazing people every day because they're part of our transition teams. We certainly don't do this alone. So I can always introduce you to someone who might be a better fit for your situation.
And you help people in all 50 states and DC? Like, where do you provide services?
Yeah, our guides are all over. So all 50 states. We have a couple clients in Canada. We even have a guide who, her husband's in the military. She lives in Turkey. So she's primarily serving European clients. So
excellent. So international.
We can help basically anyone. So
I think that it's really exciting. And I can tell that you have that passion about bringing the opportunity to not just that next generation, but also the transitioner generation, and just making sure that the conversation is out there and that people are aware that there is a different option. Because I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, that you have people that approach you, especially the heirs. I think they probably approach you because it's not going smoothly or they're hitting a friction point of so I love that you are shining a light and saying there can be a different path and it can be successful.
It's
very
hard
exciting.
when you're growing your business. I know how much time it takes because that is the same season I am in. It is like all hands on deck, focusing on growth and business development and all of these other things. So for me to say to you, give yourself more options, come explore this. That being said, you likely care a lot about your family. You care a lot about your relationships. You want to do this right with intention. You can spend a little bit of time now, give yourself even more options going forward. What a gift that is to be able to do that for your next generation. So,
well, Andrea, I really am thrilled with what you're working on. And I want to thank you for sharing everything you share with us today. It is a lot to think about.
Yeah, it is.
And I would add to what you have said, if any of this made you stop and think about your own business, regardless of what condition you think it's in today, or your options, it's probably a good idea to reach out to the resource guide, the book, or to you all directly, because you would be able then to see what could be possible. And if you need to shift direction now, you can. So maybe you're not doing it today, but you're at least finding out what's possible for the future.
For sure. If you are sitting in a place where you're like, I don't even know, is this business even sellable or transferable? What does that look like? Those are common questions that are a part of actually making a transition roadmap, because sometimes people are like, well, I have 4 years to work really hard. What's the best thing I could do in the next 4 years? And it's like, get out. Yeah, actually, you need to get yourself out of a role, because whether you're selling it to an internal buyer or you're selling it to a third-party buyer, strategic sale, at the end of the day, they are not going to need you in that business. So I'd rather see you now when you're being proactive, when you're thinking about those things, than when a lot of times it's unfortunate triggers, right? A dad passed away and now there's a stepmom and daughters trying to figure out what is even going to happen with the business. Will the business even survive? Can they work together on what that looks like? Or someone's spouse died and now he's dating someone new and we're trying to figure out how do we protect the business itself from potential new people coming into the family.
That's right.
There's so many different triggers and reasons, or someone gets sick or someone has a health scare and they're like, oh my gosh, I really need to figure this out now. Certainly we're happy to hold you and support you through that. But even better if you were proactive, because then it's like, okay, minor bump in the road, let's pivot. We're just going to do a minor detour on our roadmap and everyone knows what's going forward. And you're even more supported through that because you've already laid the groundwork.
I guess I want to add one thing to that in my experience as well with real estate agents that are attempting to sell their company. In my experience, sometimes when you wait too long, you literally do not have the energy required to show up and do what you need to do in order to have that successful transition. I know that you're the expert, so if I didn't say that in the right manner, please say it. But had that happen, one person in particular is popping to mind, where we went over everything that, was possible, what could be required, the different paths for this specific team. And I remember she called me one day and she's like, I don't have that in me anymore. I would recommend get ahead of it.
Yep, you got it.
So. Now, by the way, she did have a happy ending with it. So it's a happy story ultimately. And yet, don't put yourself in that position where you hear what's possible and maybe you have misconceptions of how long it will take or how easy it will be. And then you put yourself in this tough situation and you don't want to do that.
We started off by talking about taxes too, right? So there are things we can look at the strategy and be like, okay, it looks like you have 5 or 10 years. There are one of the tax strategies I've seen some of the attorneys and CPAs do is they'll convert you into a C Corp and then you get founders shares and then you get huge discounts on taxes and other things. And again, it all depends on what is your intention and where are you going and what is that going to look like. But for some people, that's a great option, but that's minimum 5 years.
Right.
After the transition happens that you're engaging and you're working. And 5 years is a long time, because a lot of times people are coming to us are like, I'm thinking about it in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Like that's basically double.
That's right.
It's basically double the amount of time to be able to accomplish something like that. And is that a trade-off, or is it a deal breaker? Like, are you truly wanting to be done in 2 or 3 years? Again, it just limits that number of options that you have.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I could talk to you about this for hours. Congratulations on the new addition to your family coming in. That actually is the biggest news of this whole conversation. But I just want to thank you again. And please, anyone listening, reach out if you're in a position where you believe that transition strategists could help you. Find out if they can or not. So it's worth it to reach out. If you're listening to this episode, I hope you'll join us again for the next one. And Andrea, thank you so much for being our guest.